all the argument over where rock and roll was born, there can be little debate that much of that early music was pouring out of New Orleans piano halls as well as rural juke joints during the 1950s.
In every neighborhood there was at least 3 or 4, and 2 out of the 3 or 4 had live music. It was always coming reeking out of the walls around you. Most kids who had any talent at all, if they didn't come up doing something musically, it was just the irony of it all because it was there. It was just everywhere.
I think ultimately rock and roll tends to truly form in urban centers, towns, and cities. And the 2 most important cities are New Orleans and Memphis. But out in the countryside, several things are always going on. I don't care if it's New Iberia, Opelousas in the south, or Ruston, or Delhi in the north. One is that people are listening to the radio.
Many of America's rising stars were attracted by the 50,000 watts of clear channel exposure they could get by performing on the radio program called Louisiana Hayride, broadcast from KWKH in Shreveport.
I didn't know that the people I was associated with would become such huge stars. When I worked with Hank Williams at 7:15 each morning doing a live show, little did I know how big he would be.
Jambalaya, crawfish pie, and a filet gumbo.
Hank was a good old boy and one of the great writers of all times.
The Hayride had a reputation for pioneering talent, for taking risks with artists and music that other radio programs refused to play. That was certainly the case with Louisiana Hayride's most famous star.
He's only 19 years old. He has a new, distinctive style. Elvis Presley. Let's give him a nice hand.
It's a real honor for us to get a chance to appear on the Louisiana Hayride. We're going to do a song for you we got on Sun record. It goes something like this.
He was about ready to quit when he came to Shreveport. He was about ready to give up. He'd been turned down by the Opry, and that, of course, was the ideal place to go at the time. He was told by the people up there that he should go back to truck driving. Well, he came to Shreveport, and we encouraged him. He didn't have the snarl. He didn't have the wiggle when he came here.
Papa done told me to. Son, that guy you were fooling with.
So we helped him to hone his talents and become the megastar.
Elvis Presley had seized the nation's attention with a style of showmanship that was charismatic, controversial, even notorious. All the same characteristics of another popular performer in the media spotlight of the time.
A little two-bit man that meant what he said is Earl K. Long. Don't you doubt that. Oh, yeah, I'll fight. I'll stand up for the people.
By the late 1940s, the Long political machine was on the move again, led by Huey's brother Earl.
I've been accused of being a rough and tumble man. And probably some of my conduct lends to that.
He looked and acted like a redneck, red suspenders. Most of the time, that was sort of his trademark.
He didn't want to ride to a political rally in an expensive automobile. He wanted to go in a pickup truck. And then he'd have 6 or 8 or 10 garbage cans that were full of things that people liked. Hams and chickens and things of that type that he knew people in the country needed.
He cultivated this good old boy attitude, and it took me a while to realize that he was really an extremely intelligent man.
Earl Long, I think, knew more about the people of Louisiana and the players in the politics of this state than any man either before him or since, including Huey.
In his first term as governor, he saw to it that war veterans got bonus checks up to $1,000 and a homestead exemption that virtually eliminated state property taxes on their houses. The elderly were granted pensions of more than double the average Social Security payment. Teachers got big pay hikes, and not just the white teachers.
We equalized the salaries of school teachers, blacks and whites. Prior to that time, the blacks made about half of what the white teachers made. The charity hospital system was open to blacks and to whites alike. He always said the Longs were always good to the poor people, black and white, and he lived up to that philosophy.
Like Huey, Earl Long continued building new roads, bridges, and schools. He increased funding for the state's mental asylums. But, as popular as such programs may have been, they did not come without cost.
They tell you that Louisiana is the highest tax state in the nation. Ain't so. Considering what we give and what we do for our people, it's the lowest tax state in the nation.
Earl Long doubled the state's sales taxes and reached deep into the pockets of the state's leading businesses. Still, the governor was forced to come up with some pretty creative ways to raise revenue. One of those was his $25 tax on every slot machine in the state. What made this tax particularly innovative is that slot machines weren't even legal in Louisiana. Even though it was outlawed in the state, Louisiana became the nation's capital in casino gambling, attracting organized crime and high rollers from around the country during the late 1940s and early 50s. In 1952, the state's voters decided that they had had enough of this kind of flagrant corruption and the high price of progress, at least for now. Vowing to crack down on gambling, vice, and voter fraud, Robert Kennon governed Louisiana for the next 4 years. Under his order, Louisiana became the first state in the Union to put modern voting machines in every precinct. Apparently, taking that as a personal challenge, Earl Long is reported to have said, "Give me one of those voting machines and a voting commissioner and I can control it. I can make those machines play Home Sweet Home." Earl Long returned to the governor's mansion in 1956.
What came into play beginning in 1956, more than anything else, I think, that impacted on his new administration was the power of the white citizens' councils, the Raynacks, the Leander Perez's, who launched a battle against the federal government and against the black people, not only in Louisiana, but wherever they could reach.
It was no secret that Earl Long had some pretty eccentric ways. But when it came to the question of race and segregation, he was perhaps the strangest politician Southerners had ever seen.
Yes, I like colored people. And I know there ain't many of them can vote in Gina either. And I ain't saying this for votes. I'm the best friend the colored man, and the poor white man, and the middle class, and the millionaire, if he wants to do right, ever had in the governor's office in the history of this state.
Earl Long was trying to do something. I figure he was not crazy or nothing, but he did a crazy thing according to the white people at that time, standing up for black folk. He knew full well what he was doing. He knew the value of the black vote.
When he became governor in 1948, there were 7,000 blacks registered to vote in the state. When he left the office of governor in 1952, there were 110,000 blacks registered to vote, by far the highest total of any state in the South. And this is 17 years before the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
But what seemed sensible and pragmatic to Earl Long struck his political opponents as sheer lunacy.
The segregationists in the legislature that were so powerful then, plus they had, whether we like it or not, public opinion on their side at that time, that it had a very profound effect upon Earl. Earl couldn't understand why people felt that way.
Earl Long had certainly earned his reputation as a strange and scandalous leader. He dismayed the public with his romps through the French Quarter with the 23-year-old stripper named Blaise Starr. But toward the end of his second term, it was apparent to everyone that something was now very, very wrong.
I didn't even know he was the same person. not the man that I lived with 28 years. He was like a different person I had never known in my life. He had those strokes, and oh, he was manic, taking pills of all kinds. I just couldn't believe that it would anybody could change like that.
Many things were changing for the ailing governor. Gone were the days when he could drive through the legislature, big spending programs and steep tax hikes. Now he faced a tough and growing opposition.
When I was in the legislature, however, I was not for Earl Long's administration. As a matter of fact, we had put together a group in the House we called the 34 Club, which is how many votes it took to defeat a tax, and we defeated all the girls' taxes. Natural gas, sulfur taxes, we defeated all the girls' taxes.
In perhaps the most devastating blow to Earl Long's political power, segregationists worked to revoke black Louisianians' right to vote for the second time since Reconstruction. In the city of Monroe alone, thousands were stripped from the rolls in a single month. Leading this effort were powerful white supremacists Leander Perez and State Senator Willie Raynack.
I believe that this segregation must be maintained throughout the width and breadth of our great state.
I think that issue and those people alone were the things that caused Earl Long's mental condition to deteriorate to the sad condition that it finally got.
Finally, in 1959, the governor's growing rage and frustration were released in an unforgettable tirade in front of the legislature and the public.
We don't need you. We don't need Earl Long. We don't need any sapsucker, but some red-blooded, decent, high-caliber men to hold this colored question.
For 2 hours, Earl Long hurled insults and acrimony at his enemies.
They were sitting right next to the rail on the side of the house and just staring at him, like, you know, just this intent, almost, I guess you could even call it an evil stare, certainly a malevolent stare. And he kept glancing over there, and he kept going, and finally his speech started to falter, and he went over the top.
Eventually, he had to be escorted out of the legislature. After consulting with doctors, his family had the governor confined in a mental institution in Galveston, Texas. 2 weeks later, he was transferred to an asylum in Mandeville, north of New Orleans. Earl Long, remembered as the governor who had done so much to provide better care for the state's mental patients, now joined their ranks.
Nobody knows until they go through something like that. You just don't know. It's just horrible.
It tears you apart to see a person who's been a friend, that's done as much as the man did for the state, to be remembered in most cases in the minds of most people by what he did at that moment.
In the eyes of the nation, Louisiana's governor was just plain crazy. But not everyone saw it that way.
I thought some parts of that speech, even though it was the crazy part, was a pretty solid expression.
A.J. Liebling, the astute reporter for the New Yorker, observed, and he was there at the time, Earl was actually making a civil rights speech, which was a unique phenomenon in Southern politics for that period of time.
Crazy or not, Uncle Earl still kept his wits about him, enough to maneuver his way right out of the hospital with the help of a few political allies.
To know, as governor of this state, I have diligently tried to be the governor of all the people, and not just a handful of the people. Now, had I done that, I'd be the finest man that the Picayune, Leander Perez, and the scandalmongers have ever known. Instead of you hearing about stripteasers, instead of you hearing about call girls, instead of you hearing about Uncle Earl crazy, I want you to take occasion to take a good look at Uncle Earl. If I was crazy in Galveston, if I was crazy in Mandeville, I'm still crazy.
That much was plain to everyone. The governor's condition continued to worsen. Still, he served out the rest of his term, and even won election to the United States House of Representatives in 1960. But he never got the chance to take his seat. Earl Long suffered a massive heart attack on Election Day. A week later, he died, disgraced in the eyes of many, and remembered mostly as Louisiana's lunatic governor.
The Longs of Louisiana left a mixed legacy. On the one hand, the Longs showed that state government can be a positive benefit for the people, has an obligation to do things for the people, to provide for their health care and education, transportation, and so forth. On the other hand, the Longs fostered the idea that you can get something for nothing.
Old Earl's not running for the COD. He's running for the good he can do for the people of this state. I'm the best friend the poor man, the poor colored man, ever had in the governor's office, and I'm proud of it.
To learn more about Louisiana's rich history, visit us online at louisianahistory.org.
Major funding for the series, Louisiana, A History, was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and the State of Louisiana. Corporate funding was provided by Bank One, proud to celebrate Louisiana's diverse past and committed to investing in our state's future. Community Coffee, part of Louisiana's rich history. Since 1919, devoted to providing signature coffees to our communities. Additional funding was provided by the following history patrons, helping all citizens discover the extraordinary legacy of Louisiana and its people. To order a VHS or DVD set of the series, Louisiana, A History, or the companion book, Louisiana, An Illustrated History, call 1-800-973-7246 or write to the address on your screen.